Hey guys, Jeff at Huey's Garage, and yeah, we've been real busy working on projects like the Bel Air two-door sedan. That has been the big priority anyway, but we got sidetracked with Howie's hardtop because, you know, it was so close to being back together, and we got the list initially taken care of, and now we've got a couple of small items that are left on it. So we're going to go ahead and push across the finish line with that. And you can see here I got the speedometer out, and we're going to go ahead and take the speedometer, the speedo head apart, and get all the gunk cleaned out of it because it's pretty tight and it skips and you can feel the resistance on it. So we'll get that taken apart and get that all cleaned up. But yeah, unfortunately, take the shades off. Unfortunately, we've had an even more pressing issue pop up. So this one's a real, it's a real good one for the guys that like to diagnose stuff. It's with the daily, and the daily obviously takes precedence over all this stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and dive into this one, and I think I've figured it out, but I just want to run you guys through my thought process of what I've run across with this thing, because, you know, it's not Tri-5 stuff, and you know, it's the newfangled stuff, the stuff that we usually don't touch. And you know, I've learned, especially through YouTube, that you shouldn't be afraid of this stuff. You know, it's in our lives, it's out there, you know, fuel injection, computers, all that kind of stuff. And you know, I think if this is exactly what I think it is, I think we might be able to tie this video in of working on and repairing the daily driver, the modern day daily driver, and actually tie it in with the Tri-5 Chevy world. So yeah, let's dive into it, and yeah, put your thinking caps on, because this one's a real puzzle. All right, we'll head on out. Got the kid's Nova that he's working on, and then yeah, this is the daily here. It's a 2008 GMC Yukon Denali XL, and yeah, it's a little dirty right now. We've got some construction going on in the area, so there's a lot of dust being kicked up. But basically what's happening with this right now is it's got a noise, and it's not an engine rod knock noise. It's just a noise, and let me just go ahead and just start the car so you can hear what it sounds like. All right. Sure how well you can hear that, but it basically sounds like something's hitting the fan shroud. And you can see we don't have a fan, and it's kind of a tinny sound, and kind of intermittent, comes and goes. Definitely sounds like something we don't want to be driving the car with. It speeds up when you give it gas. And it kind of sounds louder on the passenger side. So let me go ahead and shut it off, because I don't want this thing to build me heat. All right, so you guys can hear what that was. It's kind of a tinny, kind of a, I don't know, basically sounds like somebody's touching a fan blade with a screwdriver type kind of a sound. And you know, it's coming from down below. It doesn't sound like a death knock or a valve train noise. It's just kind of a tinny kind of a sound. So some of the things that I initially thought about, you know, we came home and we thought it was something that was in the driveline and got to the end of the street, heard it, thought it was a car behind us, drove to the next street over, and then headed home, and obviously we heard that it was from this car. Pulled into the driveway, got out, ran it in park, and obviously it's still making the same noise. So one of the things that I came up with was, it was running a little bit rough, and it has been some time since I've cleaned out the throttle body, and that's basically, you know, you get the spray can and clean up the throttle body. That's the modern day tune-up for these fuel injected LS's or LS based engines. This one, by the way, is the 6.2 GMC that comes in the Denali. And so one of the things that I initially thought that it might have been, because it was running a little bit rough, is I thought I might have had one of the ignition coils starting to go out. And you could see that, you know, a little bit different from the original Gen 1 small block Chevys that had one coil that powered 8 cylinders. These have the individual coils themselves for each cylinder. So I thought that, you know, that was maybe one of the issues, is that maybe one of the coils was starting to go bad. I don't characteristically know what happens to these coils on these engines when they go bad, if they, you know, they just up and go out, or if they get intermittent. But I even pulled out this tool that I have. Basically, I was going to get my sparkulator tester, as Vice Grip calls them, but I was going to go ahead and just, you know, plug this in and check each coil, because I really don't have a modern day diagnostic way to test this. And oh, and by the way, I do have a code reader, and this did not throw a code, so nothing in the code reader, everything's clean, but no real way. And assuming that one of these coils is bad, it should throw a code, from what I understand. My initial thought was use the tester and just see if I got a consistent spark with each cylinder, and I was going to start with the passenger side because it sounds louder over there. But started thinking about it a little bit more. I actually had my son come out, second set of eyes, second set of ears, and you know, he looked it over, and at that point I think I was looking at a possible catalytic converter, because it had that tinny exhaust sound. And you know, I was looking at that, and Rock Auto for this unit, I'll show you, this is probably why this isn't a real good candidate for catalytic converter theft, but it's basically a Y-pipe that has 2 catalytic converters on each side of the block. Here's the one catalytic converter, and then it goes into, comes over from the other side, and you got a second catalytic converter over there, and it goes into a Y right here, and then goes back to a single exhaust. But yeah, I initially thought it was that. These are about 570 bucks on Rock Auto, and couldn't really pinpoint that it was the catalytic converter. And then we got out my stethoscope and started touching the stethoscope everywhere underneath here, and basically up at the front of the bell housing area is where the noise was the loudest. So at that point my son thought, well, maybe you've got, let's see, let's get back up here. At that point my son and I were talking. He thought maybe you, and he did a quick Google search, and he thought, okay, well, maybe it's a cracked or broken flex plate. And you know, that's a possibility. I really think that that's a possibility, because it is from that bell housing area, and you know, it's not like a death knock or something. You know, I know what a knock, I know what a valve train knock sounds like, I know what a lower end knock sounds like. This obviously isn't that. So anyway, but one of the things I thought about checking, and I kind of went a little bit further than possibly the flex plate. I'm thinking something else, and this is where it may tie in to where we end up going later. But we're going to go ahead and get under the car, and I'm going to look at the access port into the bell housing area, and we'll see if we could find something in that area that might give us some more clues. All right, so we're under the Denali, and I got the inspection cover open, and you can see the flex plate. And if you get up in there, you know, one of the thoughts was, if it was, let's see if you can get this camera angled correctly and get good lighting on it. I can pretty much only see about 1/10 of the flex plate, and there's no cracks on it. It should be a brand new flex plate, because this Suburban actually, or the Denali did get a new engine at Chevrolet at 92,000 miles. That's another long story, but anyway, got a new engine put in, and we're at about 115 now. So it should be a fairly new flex plate, provided that the long block came with a flex plate, and I'm pretty sure it did. But one of the things that I thought that it was going to be, and I'm kind of seeing a smoking gun here, because this literally, we just caught this. What I'm looking at here is kind of a smoking gun, because, and this is where I'm leading with this, of what I think that it is you could see the teeth. Okay, filming keeps cutting out, but we're gonna go see my buddy Mike at AEI, and Mike does starters, generators, and alternators, and he's an old school guy. I've taken him a bunch of my starters and just basically given him my old generators and starters for the Tri-5s, and you know, just kind of keeping the wheel greased, because he's a good dude, and I like to keep him supported and keep him, you know, in with cores. And if I ever need anything from him, then I know I got a guy that's got my back and that's going to look out for me and do a good job. So known Mike for a lot of years. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this starter out. We'll go over and visit Mike at AEI. And most importantly, before you start this job, you definitely want to disconnect the battery. I just went ahead and disconnected the positive side on this one because it was easier to get to. And if you don't, and you're down near the starter with wrenches, you will see this. All right, to get to the starter, you definitely want to take the wheel off, and then we got the little push pins and some little 7mm screws that basically fasten down the inner fender well. So I've peeled that about halfway back to the front. We've got the battery harness right here that has a bolt that secures it to the frame, so we want to take that out, set that aside with the rest of the bolts, and then it's pretty much just like a small block Chevy solenoid. I want to say there may even be a wire that disconnects, but we'll go ahead and get a wrench in there and get those disconnected, and get the battery cables off the solenoid, and then get the starter out. All right, after a lot of cussing and swearing, I finally got the starter out. Yeah, I tell you, these engineers, they've obviously never worked on cars before. There's no way to get the starter through the bottom because of the transmission lines as well as the catalytic converter. The starter won't fit through there. And believe it or not, this guard, this exhaust manifold guard, is just tight enough that it's got about a 1/2 inch shorter than the width of the starter. So I had to get a piece of plywood and basically, or actually I got a 2x4, and just like you would you know, work the outer edge of a wheel lip that rubs, that's kind of what I did with this. I kind of rocked the 2x4 back and forth, and actually it kind of did a pretty nice job. It's still not touching the exhaust manifold, but it rolled the galvanized plate out of the way, and I was able to get the starter out. So let's go ahead and look and see what we have here. You know, I did this because I thought it'd be worth my time and effort, and I know Mike is real fair with his prices. So anyway, I wanted to look a little closer at the starter. The starter should be the original starter, even though we've got a new engine in it. So it would have the true I think we're 115, 117,000, somewhere in that area. But anyway, the Bendix gear. Yeah, it's not supposed to do that. It's not supposed to float. So there is my smoking gun. There might be, yeah, you can see a little bit of metal shavings inside there. And the Bendix gear, like I say, luckily it didn't chew it. I mean, you know, a good ear with listening to your car, and if something's not right, you know, you got to figure out what it is. Luckily we were close to home. We literally we drove it less than a quarter of a mile and drove it home. And yeah, I don't know, I know there's a clip in there that holds it, and I know there's also the spring, but that's not how a Bendix gear is supposed to act. So we're going to go ahead and take this down to Mike, and this is where we're going to tie the Tri-5 stuff into the daily driver. Let's go see Mike. Hey, we're here at AEI, and Mike's just around the side here in the first unit. And yeah, let's go in and see Mike at AEI. Alright, so if you run into any issues where you're working on your Tri-5 and you're dealing with specific starters, maybe original stuff from the original Tri-5 era, Mike is the guy. Mike knows all the numbers, he knows all the parts, he knows the best parts to put in them to rebuild your starters, your generators. He does alternators, he does just pretty much anything that involves the electrical system. And a lot of people send him stuff in the mail, and if you want your stuff done right and you need original parts, Mike's the guy. All right, so got the new starter in and got that all buttoned up. There was a small little pigtail, one of those waterproof pigtail harnesses that clipped in along the side of the engine block for the starter harness. And then you had your standard positive battery cable that went to the big terminal, and then you had your switch side on the solenoid, which is kind of hard to see in there, but it was the small terminal post and 2 bolts to bolt it up. Pretty simple. I do have to try to get some wire protector because all this stuff is brittle. I got to go through the whole car and replace a lot of that stuff, but for now got the starter in, and let's I'm not going to button it up just yet. We want to test it, make sure it works. So let's crank it over and see what it sounds like. All right, let's see. Okay. All right, battery's hooked back up, obviously. All right. Much more quiet on that starter. That's a nice starter. I know Mike uses the best of the best parts, and he's real up on that stuff. So but yeah, no more fan blade sound. So it was obviously the Bendix gear that was floating back and forth and hitting the flex plate. So do a little bit of a tune-up on this thing, spray out the throttle body, get that clean, and see the need to get that wire plastic wire sleeve stuff to replace stuff that's all brittle and broken. I got that on the back firewall there too, so that'll be another project to handle. But yeah, that could have been a very expensive fix had I not been able to diagnose that one. So all right, this thing does sound pretty good. So all right guys, we'll go ahead and button it back up. and call this project in the books. All right, guys, so that's about all I got on the latest episode of Diagnose the Daily. So yeah, it could have been a real ugly one. Really got a break on this one because I was looking at potentially, you know, a $1,700 catalytic converter setup, that Y pipe with the 2 cats in it. That was one possibility of what I thought. It also was a possibility that could have been a broken or a cracked flex plate, which that would have been a $1,400 bill, just to, you know, separate the transmission and do all that work. Probably would have taken that and had that done at a buddy's shop, because I just don't have the ability to get the thing up on a lift, and just didn't have the room to do it or the time right now. So yeah, we really lucked out that it was the starter. I mean, with everything, it was like 2 hours and we had the new starter in. And I really want to thank Mike Patullo from AEI. Mike has been a great buddy. He's a great asset to the Tri-5 world with all the knowledge that he's had and all the Tri-5s that he's owned. Great guy. I wished we could have spent more time at his shop and talked with him, but Mike did say that when it slows down a little bit, that he'll you know, we'll get a chance to go over and tour the shop and check out the projects that he's working on there at the shop. So anyway, guys, thank you for your patience. We'll get back to our regularly scheduled program next week. We've got Howie's speedometer out of the car, and we're going to go ahead and repair that, as well as a couple little items that are left on the 55 hardtop. And then we're going to jump right back on the Bel Air 2-door sedan, because that thing's supposed to be running and drivable this summer. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for tagging along, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.